Some people would say he's crazy, but I don't care.
This is the story of a painter, the story of his life, the story of his loves, the story of his work.
That was very strange. For me, it was very strange how I couldn't tell my story to anybody. But they always asking me, how was it? And when I wanted to say something, they started their story. I never told my story in Germany. It's the first time I tell you.
A painter and painting are two different things. Painting is the primordial form of expression, the beginning of all the visual arts, the trunk of the tree of art itself.
I cannot express it in words, so I express it in forms. But the cave painters did too, wasn't it? They expressed something, but maybe they didn't have a language to say that.
I think that he focuses completely on his work and has through the decades. And that's his all-consuming passion, his sense of why he's alive is his art.
Our ancestors painted on the walls of caves 700 generations ago. Animals, creatures, part human, part animal. Patterns, visions from the shamans.
I believe that the indigenous people had been open to the spirit world, and they created these beautiful marks and paintings and potteries and sculptures. And the same way the lucid artists are very interested in the spirit world, in the connection with something much larger than our small mind, is really exploring the mystery. That's where the connection is.
Some of the recent paintings have a flow and a rhythm that is, as I said, my sense is it's musical. And I know from talking to Fritz that music has been a terrifically important part of his life. And he listens to music with the classics, perhaps, with very seriously and intently.
There's always a piece of music going on in my head.
Yeah, I should say, music plays a very important part of these paintings. He's serious when it comes to music, and over the years he's talked to me about his love for Wagner and how is so deeply inspired. And you know, if you look at his paintings, you can see that. He never talked about, you know, where abstract art came from. he always talked about music. And I think that's a really a marvelous way to begin to talk about painting. Because music is so abstract, so beautiful, and there's so many different layers of it. And what inspires him, you could say, oh, that's Wagner. Or,
Götterdämmerung.
yeah. I said, what do you mean? What do you mean? And he says, you wouldn't understand. It's in my soul.
But his work is always, Fritz's work is always, I think he knows, he has something in his mind and sets it out on the canvas with great control. I would doubt whether Fritz would change a lot of things in a canvas as he worked on a single painting. I think he has there's something in his head, although he's told me that he doesn't really know what's going to come out, but I think once he starts working on the canvas, it sort of expresses itself, perhaps. Something I think many artists say that seems to come from somewhere inside of themselves.
Some of these visions come through dreams, some come through contemplation, some come through walking in the woods, some come through insight. It depends on the artist and their level of exploration, where the inspiration comes from for them.
Visions and trances. Visions in the darkness of the cave. Powerful images from worlds beyond our own. As visions rather than the storyboards of a planned hunt, the paintings take on a different light. One begins to see beyond the paintings themselves, beyond the images made with a crude brush and pot of paint. These are the visions that live in the imagination of the painter himself, ones that come from the inside out.
So when you see a work that is considered as an inner world painting, say, the viewer recognizes the painting as a phenomena of the inner world. It's not a painting in which you say, well, I see this painting, it's not really my inner world. But when you start exploring within the consciousness the aspects of the inner world and imageries of the inner world, you see a correspondence, direct correspondence, from these imagery and also these paintings.
Fritz is kind of working in that Zen-inspired consciousness, which a lot of Northern California, in fact Pacific Northwest artists were interested in the 40s and 50s and on up until today. And I saw in these brushstrokes, these kind of unconscious brushstrokes that make such a beautiful abstract composition, that kind of Zen-inspired motif.
Yeah, first when he had his hands free, you know, he could walk without his hands. Then he could do something. He made tools and gave messages on the walls of the caves where they lived. I'll show you, yeah.
He's exploring color relationships of how does one color work next to another color in juxtaposition with another color. And it's I think it's a very serious kind of exploration that he is pursuing. I recall that years ago in some reviews, newspaper reviews of his work and shows, that the reviewers would comment that I remember it seems to me more than once, his work being described as decorative, which to my mind struck me as showing absolutely no insight into really seriousness with which he pursued his art and the seriousness with which he was exploring color.
From his mind to his hand to the surface on which he paints. This is not the story of art. It's the story of one painter.
I had this big operation, which enables, since then I'm not able to anymore to stand up for a long time. And I had to invent something in a sitting position. I'm not the only painter like that.
A story of a man who has the same need as those early painters, of a man whose life was carried by the tides of history, a man whose life has been defined by his passion for art.
Since a little boy. I always painted. I was born and started painting.
This is the story of Fritz Rauh and his wife and muse, Alex.
Reflections. But where are my friends? That is funny. Where they went. They were all sitting here, the pictures I showed you. See if they're there. Oh look, oi, too late. You see, sometimes they're just here. That is too bad.
She's mad photographer now.
That looks so freedom, that looks a reflection, and the, I can try, but I made them, that's really a little far.
In 1920, I was born on November 25th in the Rhineland. 1923, my first remembering. I was looking out my window down at the railway station. It was different than usual. It was flooded with blue colors of the uniforms of French soldiers. 1927. We moved to a new place that has electricity and a modern bathroom. My father later said this was the best time in his life. My father was active in the Communist Party. 6 years later, to get away from the local Nazis, we moved again. My father found a job in a foundry. Now, I got very interested in art. In 1934, school days over. I became an apprentice in a shop. My job was to deliver the goods and the wallpaper by bicycle to the clients. I was very unhappy and I came to fight with my supervisor and was fired. In 1938, my father sent me to his brother Willi in Braunschweig. Uncle Willi had a little business in engineering. He could use me as technical draftsman and typing his business letters. I was again very unhappy and it came to heavy protest. My father came a long distance to help with my problem, what to do. it came to a wonderful solution. With the help of a neighbor, it was arranged that I would show my work to Herr Kurt Moher, the director of an art school. This was very successful for me, as he offered to take care of my artistic education and all other needs. I spent many hours in his house talking about art and hearing music. I was very happy. 1940, I was drafted into the German army. The training as an infantryman was long and hard, but what made me most unhappy was that the guys I was with did not like me because I was different. As comrades in arms, this changed later to friendship in the real war in Russia. 1941. 22nd of June, we are attacking at 3 a.m. We are all very excited, but sometimes we got very scared. By December, we were at the Kalifornien area northwest of Moscow. It was the coldest winter in Russian history, and I got frostbite on my face and feet, but luckily only first degree. 1942, June. Transported to the Orel, south of Moscow, to attack again. Here I had another great impression of color. Our artillery shells created an enormous smoke spectacle in front of us. In this, the sun sent its morning rays and caused a spectacle of color, mostly pink and yellow. Later in my life, these colors played a very important role in my paintings. Later in that day, I was shot through my upper left knee. This put me away from the front for several months. I could see my parents and my great friend Kurt Mohr. I also made a new friend, Erik, another soldier. One day, Erik and I had to bring a criminal soldier to his punishment place in the Lorraine. On the way back, we made a little detour, first to meet his father, and then to Heidelberg to meet his great flame Lydia, a singer. We had a wonderful evening at their place. We became very close friends. 1943. Early that year, back to the Russian front. After heavy fighting, one day I was sent on leave to the city of Sumy to enjoy the theater. When I walked in, I saw my friend Erik sitting with his violin in the orchestral pit. He said, "We need a painter for the stage." I did not take this very seriously, but the next morning I was ordered from my company commander to show up in Sumy at the theater. Now I was in service for the troops' entertainment. I had a wonderful time in Sumy and made new friends with Gustav, the stage designer, and Bernhard, the composer. We lost the Battle of Kursk and had to retreat, and the theater was dissolved. But Gustav arranged with his commander that the three of us would continue as a small group from the theater. During that time we got to see a beautiful performance of Puccini's Tosca. Near the end of the year we were ordered to return to our units, and on the way I got a terrible pain in my back, kidney stones. At the nearby hospital it was soon over with morphine. The doctor did not send me back to my unit and instead asked me to help with his many heavily wounded soldiers. After that, I was back at the garrison in Düsseldorf. 1944. In Düsseldorf, I am glad to see my good friend Erik again. We went to see Mozart's The Marriage of Figaro, and we enjoyed it very much in spite of an interruption by Allied bombs. By March, I was in the deep snow in Russia again, in the Kofel area. Under pressure from the Soviet offensive, we had to retreat, and I was separated from my unit. I became a prisoner of war on the 20th of July, my mother's birthday.
Russians from all sides yelling at us. And this other guy said, I still have a hand grenade. Should I throw it and then they run? I said, are you crazy? Instead of that, we went up. And these guys took everything, watch, everything they could find. And but otherwise they were not bad. No, they treated us like we would do the same, But the next morning we were loaded on their trucks and went away, and came to a place where other prisoners were already, and they left us there. And there everything changed. There were no nice guys there. They took our shoes off. We were barefoot now, and we had to dig our graves. Things like that. And this went on for a long time. From there we went to Kiel with the railway, and we had to make a propaganda march through the city, and that was awful. We already had the diarrhea. We had to sit on the streets. But there weren't many people watching us. We saw only, there was some older woman in one place. They started crying when they saw us, and came to the final place. That was Zaporozhye, on the Dnieper River, about 100 kilometers from the Black Sea. And there it was very bad. Almost nothing to eat. We became sex was gone. How you call it? When your sex drive goes away. After a year, it became a little better. There weren't so many dying anymore. And I was asked from the propaganda guys, the German guys, to paint a Stalin on the white wall outside the barracks. If I could do that, I said yes, I can do anything. And from then on, I didn't have to. I had some little income. Not every day, but sometimes. An extra soup from the kitchen. So I survived. I got many times I had to paint that head. This was my surviving. I don't think I would have made it without it. I was laying on the floor already. The rats were running over us.
To me, this to me is the amazing thing. Why you, and one of the few people who've witnessed the tragedy of our 20th century, and I've been thinking about that because you are there, been part of it in so many different details, and I'm not going to go through them, but I know that that has given you the urge to enter another world of hope out of the wreckage of your country and out of what you love and what you cherish about that culture, and you still have kept it alive in your way and your paintings. So I think that is, to me, the most heroic thing.
Oh, thank you. I never heard such a nice talk. The camp was liquidated one day, but I and several other guys were put into another camp. So they all went home. And why that was, I don't know. I think it was because everybody of us was always investigated by the NKVD, the organization. The Soviets had to find out things from you. And I had to come there many times too, and they wanted to hear something about other prisoners, what they did wrong, and they never said anything. And they got mad at me because of that. You know? And I declared, I can't do that, I can't do this. You have to look for somebody else.
In January of 1950, I crossed over the new German border, having spent 6 years in a Russian prisoner of war camp. Coming home to my parents was a great joy. Kurt Moore urged me to come to Braunschweig to continue my art education, which I enjoyed to do. This was my first time I had to confront modern art. I was very confused. Seeing many important shows helped me very much. Talking to my fellow students made me feel old-fashioned and far behind. But as fate would have it, I met my future wife, Alex.
And then Fritz I met before I went to to America. I had already my visa that I go to this country. And then I met Fritz in Germany in the art school. There came Fritz all of a sudden in, very impressive. The door went open, everybody talked before. Fritz, that is a late homecomer from the Russian prison camp. We all worked there already after I had our studio and painted and had models. And then he was sort of the adopted son from the art director in that school. He didn't have children himself and took care of Fritz. And thought he was very talented and gave him a free scholarship, and he was there. But now he was in the war for 9 years. And then he came back and everybody talked in the school, oh, that stepson from Moore, Kurt Moore, the director, art director, came back from Russian prison camp. And he signed up here for this class. So the door went open and there was Fritz, all dressed up with a hat and a suit. And I was a little snobbish and thought, oh God, that is it looks more like an architect, you know. We only counted the people that paint dirty with things like that. But that was all fake, because he was a week ago he was in rags, coming back from prison camp, and the city dressed him all new from the top to the bottom. So it was completely fake coming in. This well-dressed artist came in. But we I think we recognized each other. I think we spotted each other pretty much. We always think we love on the first moment. That's what we think.
Very important was our bicycle trip to the Eastern Sea. We had a tent with us, a very small tent. We just fitted into it. I think it took 3 days to get there, huh?
We had a pot. Maybe you have the picture still. I showed you a picture. I think we had just a cooking pot on the back of the bike here. And we cooked ourselves in the sand. And you made 2 watercolors, remember?
I made 2 watercolors.
2 beautiful watercolors I have still in the house. Yeah.
That was the first time I saw the sea.
Yeah.
In my life. First time I see it. Looking out, water, nothing else.
It wasn't just him. Without your wife, Alex.
That's right.
Alex is so important because to create this kind of environment.
No problem.
And she's part of because she comes from it. She's artistic, and they're both. I mean, without.
She comes as an artist family.
Yeah. So this is all part of the environment that he comes from, and he never ran away from it because that was the one he just brought it, and we're in California very lucky to have him come. And
Alex comes with a pedigree in art. She comes from a long line of artists. In 1807, Alex's great-great-grandfather was born Heinrich Brandes, and he would become a master landscape painter. Alex's grandfather was Rudolf Wilke. He was a famous illustrator and editor of Simplicissimus, the satirical magazine published in Munich. He was prolific, and his works were published often.
It was what you would call here the logo of the Simplicissimus. That was the fighting bulldog, you see, in a sense, the symbol, you see, of the satirical magazine, drawn by Thomas Theodor Heine, and I think it's an awfully strong piece. And this is probably in Germany the most distinguished satirical magazine between 1890 and to the middle of the 20th century.
Alex never knew her grandfather because he died at the age of 32. But her grandmother was an integral part of her daily life.
And my grandmother was also an artist. They're all, like you see, the paintings. She was, she used to, there were not so many, she copied old masters from, Rembrandt's. And she was always proud when the museum people said, don't take the original away here, because she got it so good. And she made her living with it. Big families bought, at that time they bought, wanted copies of old masters. And there came Fritz. And my grandmother first said, I don't want to meet that art student. All those non-doers are going to that art school, all those failures are going to art school when they don't get anything else. So I had to sit with Fritz in another room because she didn't want to have that failure in her room. And then after a while she called, let him come in. So then finally, it's a different time. Then he went in the room and they got involved right away. And she said, that is not some of those failures. This is a real artist. That is a man you can talk to. And I mean, he and my grandmother was talking day and night together, always. They got a big friendship, yeah.
Alex's grandparents had 2 children, a boy and a girl. The girl was Alex's mother, and the boy, Alex's uncle, Ulfred. The whole family was steeped in art. They were painters and intellectuals.
I loved both my grandmother and my mother. And we always together and felt very good with them. And my mother was always very sweet to me, very spoiled me, very loving and sweet to me, yeah. And she has even 2 children's books I have here. She published in Germany 2 children's books. And one about Braunschweig and a nice children's book, yeah. And she always tried to, and worked very hard to make portraits of other people. And but she was happy when she earned a little money, yeah. So we were always short on money. Shall I give you a sad story? When I would write a book about myself, if I'm away from myself and write a book about myself, my childhood, yeah, then I would have sympathy for my childhood. My mother always tells that story that was kind of said, they said, Alex, don't you want to finish up your milk? You see, I could cry about myself. And I said, no, I drink that when I come back. But I never came back, you know, I had to go. He brought me, that uncle brought me to the other end of Germany, to that boarding school. And there, after 2 weeks, they wrote home, what happened? Your daughter never, your child never say one word. Is something wrong with her? So it took, maybe it was a shock to be author. So I was 3 years old, and I got that wonderful place. It's a wonderful boarding school, but later, because of the Nazis, they had to leave and went to Switzerland. But that time, Thomas Mann and those children were all in that boarding school, the children of Thomas Mann. But in that boarding school, I had only the privilege to go because my Simplicissimus artist, my grandfather, his brother, there was a connection with that, true connection that he was an artist. All his art brought us, gave us good opportunities.
Alex's uncle Ulfred played a major role in her life, and on the cusp of World War II, Uncle Ulfred left for America. He was a painter, a collector, and a museum director. He had an infectious enthusiasm. His paintings sometimes had an element of calligraphy, almost like an alternative language.
The collecting was incredibly time-consuming and costly too. I could have lived a much easier life without all these troubles. But I think at one point in life you have to accept what you are. I think there is a poem by Tennyson, and there is a phrase in it which says, "You are what you are." And that sounds first very simple, but we all don't want to accept that kind of a sentence. We all think that we have really the power to decide our own fate. But if you look at any individual, you see the very fact that they are so different from each other, that includes that they might have made all the strides and efforts, you see, to be different from the way they are, but in the end they are what they are. Mm-hmm. And so maybe I have to be content with the fact, you see, that I'm a collector, and I can only force myself maybe to hold back, but I think to assume that I really will stop completely forever collecting is probably that means, you see, I think would curtail, you see, my sense of life, and which of course will come about at one point anyway.
Is my mother's brother, my good uncle Ulfert Bilke. He is a known artist. He was a museumsdirector in Iowa, and he has shows all over. And he was a teacher in Louisville, Kentucky, in the university, art teacher. And he brought me over from Germany because I was the youngest in the family.
In 1953, Uncle Ulfred brought Alex to America for a chance in a new land that he had grown to love. When Alex met Fritz, her trip to America had already been arranged. Alex made a promise to Fritz that she would either return to Germany or help him come to America. In January 1954, Fritz Rauh arrived in California.
Ulfert Bilke was, at first he was, I think he was against the thing that would come. Maybe Alex does not have that feeling. No, and she knows it too. He wanted her to stay here, like he did. But this changed because he's an artist, I'm a younger one. I could see that he was a good artist, and they became very friendly to each other.
1 month after his arrival, Fritz and Alex were married in Mission Dolores Church in San Francisco.
We got married.
Yes.
In 1954.
Yeah, right.
That was a catastrophe.
It's funny. A catastrophe, you call it?
Everybody was drunk, huh?
Yeah. No, that was all right. Yeah. No, we really had not much money. We finally wanted to get married, what we wanted to do in Germany already, and we had no money to buy rings. So we bought in Woolworths 15 cents.
Fake ones.
15 cents a piece. And I thought we had to marry in a church. And we went really, because I used to be Lutheran, and that was in San Francisco, Dolores.
We did that to please that guy.
Which one?
Who employed you.
Oh, yeah, that is right.
Yeah, he was a churchgoer.
Yeah.
Professional churchgoer.
Yeah.
Because I needed somebody. I needed somebody who takes care of me. And having company all the time. I don't like to be alone all the time.
I had a very beautiful life with you.
I love you. I love you.
I love you, yeah. It was good.
Alex's passion for art was translated into photography. She loves the quality of light in nature and captures it with enthusiasm. She's not afraid of difficult subjects and photographs that which inspires her.
I want to make a good picture too someday. Not now, because you cannot do everything. You see depth of field, this long way down. You see that? Yeah. Good. I like the birds, the ocean, the flowers, and the air. I just love nature.
California worked its legendary charm on Fritz. The green of its vineyards, the yellow rolling hills, and the deep blues of the Pacific Ocean began to be part of his palette. California's easygoing ways and friendly people couldn't be any more different than post-war Germany.
I love the yellow hills, the color, the yellow hills, they fascinate me.
He's developed his own personal vocabulary of shapes and forms that relate directly to nature. However, he's sort of personalized them in a way that distinguishes his art from others. His color palette is distinctly his own too, and intensely personal, as much from the environment in which he lives and the nature that he looks at and is perhaps inspired by, as his own sense of color.
He began to meet people. He began to show his work.
Comes to California, meets other people, talks about art, and they compare, and he thinks he's been so versed in his family and his wife's theater and his background as a painter. So he's very in music. He's very alive to all of this. He brings his culture to California. Not that he had to meet these other painters to change, but they helped him and he helped them to find their way in the paintings that they started to create. And if you call it abstract, that might not be the final word, but each one seemed to influence each other, I think.
Fritz had his first solo exhibition in 1956 in the De Young Museum in San Francisco.
There were very adventurous curators at both the De Young and the Legion of Honor at that time. The two museums were not joined together as they are today, and they had separate and competitive programs of exhibitions and collecting. And for example, the Legion gave Richard Diebenkorn his first one-person show in 1948, and the De Young gave Wayne Thiebaud one of his first one-person shows at about that same time, maybe a little later in the 1950s. So I know that the curators then, Jerry McKagy here at the Legion and Ninfa Falvo at the De Young, were looking at the work of up-and-coming artists whom they considered to be important then and had great futures ahead of them. So I can only imagine that Fritz would have been one of those artists who had been selected, and for that reason.
Prominent art critic of the time for the San Francisco Chronicle, Robert Albright, said about Fritz's work, "Among paintings, the most worthwhile show is by Fritz Rauh, an artist who has not been suffering from overexposure, and whose canvases are a wonderfully personal synthesis of Toby Paterti-style calligraphy and op color. Rauh's raggedy scriggles, twists, turns add up to pointillistically fused abstract mazes, but mazes through which the eye is always made to follow carefully controlled paths."
But I began to notice what Fritz's vocabulary was, so to speak. There were certain shapes and forms that he used over and over again, that he would develop and then drop, and then bring back, reform, reshape. So I think that's what was so interesting about it. Fritz falls into that art historical category of biomorphic abstraction. It was a movement, an international art movement in which artists who were interested in surrealism and cubism sort of adopted a style that related to natural forms. Biomorphic is a good description of their work.
Introduced to other people, and Fritz got his own style little by little. He found broke away from that influences and met here nice California artists, and they were so it developed into more abstract after the years. I see it more and more. First, now it's maybe the most abstract right now.
Me, after a while, was the artist here. And one important man is Gordon Onslow Ford, which I met in the 50s.
I remember the first time I met Fritz Rauh was through Gordon Onslow Ford, and he said, "I want you to meet this wonderful painter. He's a great painter, but he's a great person." And I just can't distinguish between who Fritz is and who's painting his paintings. So for me to describe his paintings, I like to say something about who Fritz is, who is this very gentle being, very sensitive, a man who is able to create these beauties.
You have a concept and you start, you know.
The colors of California and the community of artists brought a new light into the life and work of Fritz Rauh.
I live with one of Fritz's paintings, and it's in my living room, and I see every day I see something new. And it's so beautiful to discover something new every day.
But Tolstoy, like a great painter, moves you from one level to another level, and you become more aware of the deeper level as you grow older and more experienced. You read Tolstoy 50 years later, or 40 years later, all of a sudden you see things that were so profound, you just didn't, it's not a footnote, it's just the whole human condition that Tolstoy presents to us, which we have not, as a 20-year-old, could understand. And that's what I talk about, a great work of art. A great work of art lives forever in the human consciousness, as well as a painting, or a piece of poem, or a piece of music. It absolutely waits for those who are, can go deep into the profundity of the meaning of that expression as an artist and as a human.
Because initially you just see colors and form, and then when you start paying attention to it, suddenly you see other images surfacing. So he has this implicit order that people don't see, but then suddenly it starts revealing little by little. And his brilliance in the use of color is absolutely amazing.
I hope that I can express my world. In a world. My special world. You know. I don't think I can put this in words. I think this is something my medium is paint, color, lines. I couldn't express that in words.
Fritz has painted every day for over 60 years. The blood that ran in the veins of that cave painter 700 generations ago now runs in Fritz. He will paint until he can no longer lift his brush. It's an obsession. He cares to paint. He needs to paint. He must paint. This is Fritz Rauh.
Yeah, this is very bad.